Welcome, everyone, to Catholic Sunday Scriptures in Context. This is a ministry of the Augustinian Order, as well as St. Paul and St. Augustine parishes in Philadelphia. Today, we are focusing on the 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time. As you may see there from the pictures, the next 4 weeks, or 5 weeks rather, we read from John's Gospel, chapter 6, which is his reflection on the Eucharist. John does not have a Last Supper, that is the Eucharistic meal, in his Gospel. The Last Supper serves a different purpose. So this is where he equates Jesus with the bread of life. So our first reading comes from the second book of Kings, and this is a story that takes place around 850 BC, about 100 years before Amos, the prophet we talked about last week. And Elisha, who is the prophet here, has a school of students, and there are about 100 of them according to the story there. And the students are sitting before him, Yashav, which eventually gives us the word yeshiva, which is a Jewish school, because students sit as they listen to their teachers. And at this moment, there is a famine going on in Israel. And so this man donates barley loaves and barley grain, and Elisha takes this opportunity to teach about the providence of God. And he instructs that the loaves, which were given to him, be given to the students. And his servant doubts that it will be enough. But Elisha believes in the providence of God. And not only is there enough, but there turns out to be an abundance here. So you can see, give it to the people to eat, Elisha says. And his servant objected because he wanted to be conservative and not be generous. And, the lesson here is share what you have and there will be more than enough. Our second reading is a continuation of the reading from the letter to the Ephesians. So, as I mentioned in the past, we know this is not Paul writing it. The style is much different, but the person really is familiar with Paul's teachings and seems to be a very devout follower of Paul. So a couple things here. One, a part of this passage here is a quote from Colossians, and we know that Paul never really quoted from his other letters. In Ephesians, there are quotes from several of Paul, from Corinthians and from Romans and so forth. So, and we believe that this letter wasn't originally written for the Ephesians. One of the early Christians, who was a writer, actually said this was the letter to the Laodiceans, but rather we believe it was written to a larger group as a reflection and a summary about Christianity and where it was right around or before the year 100. And it seems to be written against Gnosticism, which had separated Christianity into two groups: those who knew about the secrets of the Christian faith and those who didn't. And this letter is against the Gnostics, that all are one, that there is one God, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. And that's what's at issue here, at least we believe. And so you see these: one body, one spirit, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God. The emphasis on that everyone has access to the teachings of the faith, not just an elect few. And then our gospel today is from John, and this is the beginning of the discourse on the Eucharist. And it is the feeding of the 5,000. So there are 6 feeding of crowds in the 4 Gospels, right? 2 in Mark, 2 in Matthew, 1 in Luke, and 1 in John. And in John's take on this, which is the last one written, he refines the telling of the story. And so the least important person, a child, gives them the food, or a young person, gives them the food that they will need to feed thousands. And the story lets us know that it's more important what you give than what you receive, because the Jewish concept that they're comparing themselves to is that, the more blessings you have, the more God favors you. But here in Christianity, the more you give, the more God favors you. And so the word here for giving thanks, which is highlighted in the reading, is the word for Eucharist, to give thanks. And the food had been abundant. There was 12 baskets left over. And through this miracle, the people, or sign rather, that's what John refers to it as, a sign, the people recognized Jesus as the prophet who is to come, and therefore they sought to make him a king. So Jesus went up the mountain, and that phrase, because the mountain is where the people met God, at the time of Mount Sinai. And, the Sermon on the Mount, these were the words of God. So it's a reference that this miracle reveals Jesus as the one sent by God, and times it with the Jewish feast of Passover. So it's made clear that this is connected to what we're going to call the Eucharist. And in the story here, I think it says somewhere, have them sit down on the grassy field. So Passover was a time when the fields were green, covered in green, because it's just the first part of spring. And so there is a boy who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And so you see there was a great deal of grass in that place. So that is the springtime. And so then Jesus gave thanks. That's where the word Eucharist is, so that nothing will be wasted. And they claim that this is truly the prophet. Please pray for peace. And if you think this is helpful to someone, please pass it on. Thank you very much.